This is NNI Bites Big Learnings, a podcast where fellow healthcare professionals converse about the latest on nutrition science. We are joined by the chairs and speakers of NNI and WNSC Workshop 102 as they share practical insights on the impact of proper nutrition that contribute in the optimal growth of children.
Well, hello and welcome to our podcast NNI Bites Big Learnings. My name is Andrew Prentice. I'm Professor of International Nutrition at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And it's my huge pleasure today to welcome Professor Ahmad Suryawan to our podcast. And he's going to tell us quite a complicated story about critical and sensitive periods in child development and how we distinguish these. Dr. Suryawan is Professor of Child Development at Airlangga University in Surabaya, here in Indonesia. And among his many esteemed positions, he heads the Division of Growth and Development in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Airlangga and Sutomo General Academic Hospital. He's a member of the International Pediatric Association Working Group on School-Aged Children and sits on the Council of the International Society for Developmental Origins of Health and Disease. So, Professor Suryawan, it's a special pleasure to welcome you in your own country to talk about this topic of child development.
Yeah, Professor Andrew, of course, I feel very honored to be invited and to do this podcast with you today. My name is Ahmad Suryawan. I'm Professor of Child Development at Faculty of Medicine at Airlangga University in Surabaya, Indonesia, here. As a pediatrician consultant in the field of growth development of infants and children, my lines of research are mostly regarding early detection of developmental disorders, brain development in early age, long-term growth and development outcome of high-risk infant, and the impact of early intervention on typical or atypical development.
Fantastic. And the paper you presented was in the 102nd Nestlé Nutrition Institute's workshop here in Bali. And the overall title of the workshop was Growing Strong, Harnessing the Power of Nutrition for Child Health. And your talk, set central to that. And we could have no one better to tell us about this very important period of development. Now, you concentrated our attention on the child's developing brain.
Yeah.
That's the most wondrous organ that is really the essence of human development, isn't it? I mean, This is what sets us apart from other species.
Yes.
Our big brain.
Yeah.
And before we get to the issues around how the brain learns things, we could start, I thought, by talking to us about the complex process of how the brain develops in the fetus.
Yeah, the development of the brain is a very complex and long-lasting process, I think. Focus on the timing of ontogenic event of telencephalon, neuronal proliferation and migration, especially of occur during the first half of gestation. The second half of gestation is the period of existence of the functionally important transient structure called sublet. And the major period of glial cell proliferation and programmed cell death. This is intrauterine, whatever. And axon and dendrite sprouting and synapse formation blooming during the last trimester of gestation and the first postnatal year. Major part of myelinization occurs also during the first year after birth. Many developmental processes such as myelinization, synapse formation, and synapse elimination continue through all childhood and adolescence. Evidence is emerging that the peak of synapse elimination occurs between puberty and onset of adulthood, I think. And neurotransmitter systems are present from early fetal life onward, and their pre- and perinatal development is characterized by period of transient overexpression usually.
Mm-hmm.
So
may I interrupt you? Let me get this right.
Yeah.
Because with most organ systems, the cells form and divide and then stay there.
Yeah.
But with the brain, something different is going on.
Yeah.
Many of the glial cells, the neurons, they form And then many of those are killed off again. Can
Yes.
you talk me through that in a bit more detail? It's kind of hard to get your head
Do you
around
mean
why that happens.
pruning process?
The pruning, yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
the pruning process.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pruning process. Just principally, if we a pruning process in the healthy brain is not a pathological process. This is a physiological.
Right.
Yeah, this is apoptosis, the programmed cell death. This is programming.
So why is that done then? The brain is trying to set up this network of connectivity?
Yes.
And sometimes it creates bits that aren't needed
Yeah.
and that then have to be taken away again in
Yes.
order not to clog the whole thing up. Is that right?
It just simply if you never use this circuit, they will pruning itself with something called like apoptosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, apoptosis. So
Intentional cell death.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's for healthy brain processes. They need it.
Okay. So if a neuron isn't used, it's redundant.
Yes.
Then it dies.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
dies.
all the active ones are left. And
Yes.
that leaves
Yeah.
space for the connectivity.
That's uniquely this only happen in early childhood.
Okay. All right. So let's move on. So you said that a lot of this occurs in the second trimester, in the second half of gestation, the second and third trimesters.
Yeah.
Then the baby's born.
Yes.
Suddenly, it's exposed to all these stimuli. I mean, I'm sure in utero it can hear things, it can hear its mother's heartbeat and things. But suddenly it's born.
Yeah.
And the big wide world is there. It's smelling things, it's hearing things, it's feeling things, it's tasting things. Tell us what happens then.
Yeah. After child is born, there are only 3 processes in the child brain that are very active, and also only in the first years after birth, including axon and dendrite sprouting, synapse formation, and myelinization. The 2 main keys of determinant in this case are fulfill of early nutrition and early experience from their environment, which absolutely distinction cannot and should not be separated. The brain synapse network will only form if the child gets sensory experience from the outside, which is widely known as stimulation. Stimulation. Synapse formation occurs most actively when the child is still young, with a different speed of various areas of the brain. But we must know the peak of synapse formation in a child brain occurs before the child is 2 years. This is a principle of the first 1,000 days of life. Yeah. And when a child reaches of the age of 6, the brain volume has reached until 95% compared with the adult brain. Yeah, the adult brain. Practically, the combination of early nutrition and early stimulation, this will form 95% of the child brain architecture, with the function of determining whether the child can have basic development abilities that include gross motor, language, and speech, socialization, and so on. So from these 4 basic abilities in the early age, children form the other main abilities in the next age, namely intelligence and emotion, and also behavior.
And ultimately what we capture in the phrase human capital.
Yes.
Their ability to have a good life, their ability to earn a living, to raise a family, etc., which is so important. Now, this, of course, is a conference about nutrition, and we have a separate talk and podcast with Dr. Sarah Cusick, who is going to tell us more about the importance of nutrition in the growing brain. But I'd like to return to your the point you've just made, which is that nutrition and stimulation need to go hand in hand. You cannot and should not have one without the other.
Yes.
But also now get back to what I think initially I found very confusing, and what I think listeners will find confusing, which is, could you explain to us the difference between a critical period and a sensitive period?
Yeah. This thing is very tricky because it's like similar, but exactly it's not the same between critical and sensitive period. Understanding the concept of critical and sensitive period of child development is constantly changing along with technological advances in the study of the human brain. Because the concept of critical period of child development cannot be separated from the processing of maturation of the child brain development itself. In the context of time, the critical period is a certain part of the sensitive period. This is the concept of time.
Mm-hmm.
If the sensitive period is a representation of a time when the experience received by the child from exposure to the surrounding environment have a significant influence of the development of the child brain, then the critical period is a representation of the time when the development of the child brain that has formed at the time can no longer be changed when the period has ended.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there are two principally concept comparing the sensitive period and critical period in terms of plasticity. Critical period, narrow time windows of the plasticity driven by nutrition and also environmental input.
And if I'm not mistaken, it has a sort of sharp beginning and a sharp end. It begins and ends abruptly.
Yes,
right?
abruptly.
Okay.
Yeah. That is critical period. And closure of the critical period is achieved through molecular breaks, molecular processes.
So once those molecular processes have switched, there's no going back.
And allow for that's constraint plasticity and allow for permanent structural consolidation of one of a few possible connectivity patterns. That is permanently. There's no point to it.
Right.
Yeah. In the other hand, sensitive period is a broad time. Critical period is a narrow time, and sensitive period is broad time windows of gradually changes in plasticity driven by nutrition and also environmental input also. Sensitive period are not closed by molecular constraint and can be further reopened by changing the environment situation. So the consolidation of one of a broad range of possible pattern of connectivity is reversible and remain functionally dynamic.
So that's so important in terms of teaching parents through healthcare professionals that the window of the critical window of development, the physiology has finished its process, but you can still the brain can still be sensitive to external stimulation and learning.
So the wrapping is the concept of critical and sensitive period is a manifestation of maturation of child brain development. Right now, evidence clearly demonstrated that critical aspect of brain architecture begin to be shaped by nutrition experience before and soon after birth. So, critical period is subset of sensitive period, of which the effect of nutrition and experience on performance are irreversible. That's a critical period. Current study exploring this possibility that timely nutritional and stimulation intervention during this critical period.
And so, I mean, perhaps we should be careful about bringing a third term in here, but you mentioned it in your lecture, which is critical windows.
Yes.
And so if I'm not mistaken, a critical window, which occurs with other organs, the development of the pancreas or the liver or whatever, but in terms of the brain we're discussing now, the critical period, this is a concept, you quoted my great friend Pat Bateson from Cambridge, who did many studies in monkeys and primates many years ago. So tell us how the window of opportunity, this terminology, fits with critical and sensitive periods. Is that just a big term that captures the critical and sensitive windows?
For me, myself, window of opportunity is only a popular metaphor that describe, just describe the sensitive period itself.
So we're not wrong to just go to the shorthand of critical windows, but it's a bit perhaps naive. It's much more complicated than that. Is that's your message?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Professor Suryawan, thank you so much for helping us to understand the important distinction between critical and sensitive periods in a child's growth and development. It's been a huge honor to talk to you and to learn from you.
Yeah, of course.
A long time since we last met, so I hope
Yes.
it won't be so long into the future.
Thank you very much,
Oh,
Professor Andrew.
It's been a pleasure. Now, let me try and end by summarizing your key messages. We learned, I think, that a critical period represents a window in time where there's a heightened plasticity. By plasticity, we mean adaptability in brain development, when it's especially sensitive to environmental inputs, be they positive, good nutrition, for example, or be they negative, maybe irradiation in the womb or something. And these critical periods, the thing about critical periods is that they have a defined ending, which is achieved, as you told us, by molecular changes. Yeah. Now, sensitive period, on the other hand, are periods of gradual change in plasticity, shaped by environmental inputs, especially nutrition. And you made the important point that nutrition needs to go hand in hand with stimulation of the baby, of the infant, and of the child. And a sensitive period is not closed by molecular events. And although, so it means that later gains in brain function can be achieved, although they're more difficult outside the sensitive period. And the periods of greater sensitivity in human development are as a fetus and young infant, which is why we as nutritionists are constantly emphasizing the huge importance of the first 1,000 days. This magical number, which is the 270 days of pregnancy added to the 730 days of the first 2 years of life. And if we can apply optimal nourishment to the child's brain in this early life period, that child will reap the fruits of our intervention and our investment for the rest of their lives. Is that a good summary?
Yes, very nice.
Thank you. All based on what you told us.
Yeah.
So, dear listeners, thank you very much for listening to our podcast. And we hope that you'll subscribe through the NNI 365 app to ensure that you don't miss any future offerings.
And that concludes today's episode. Thank you for joining us for this special episode from NNI and WNSC Workshop 102. We hope you enjoyed and learned from this quick discussion, fellow experts. Till the next episode.